up, girl?
Yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome back to episode number 42 of the Faith and Whatever podcast. Really excited. We are finally over our post-Thanksgiving turkey coma.
We all woke up.
Feeling pretty good, and now we are in the middle of Advent, and we are excited about being able to celebrate that season with you. And so we're just going to jump right in. Advent is a time for what, James? Why don't you give us some lowdown on it?
Well, a lot of people confuse Advent and Christmas.
I don't know why my hood was on.
I think our cultural excitement over Christmas has overtaken what Advent is, and Advent's a very different thing.
Quite somber, actually.
Yeah, if you're being a very traditional Christian, we're talking like very traditional liturgical calendar, then the Christmas really doesn't start until the night before Christmas, and then
Christmas Eve.
Right, and then it lasts for about a week. And
hey, you want to know what the day before Christmas Eve is called?
It's not Christmas, Adam.
Dang it. Yes, it is.
No, that is a myth.
Yes, it is. So are Adam and Eve.
It's a
Shots fired.
It's a misunderstanding of what the word Eve means there. It's not referring to Eve.
I was just told there would be chocolate.
Okay. So Christmas really takes place between what we call Christmas Eve and the New Year, and then after that, for the traditional Christian calendar, that's all of Christmas.
This is my favorite pagan holiday.
Yeah. Advent is a very different thing than Christmas. It's what it does is it thinks on it eagerly waits on the second coming of Christ, and to do that, it focuses on biblical passages and stories where people were awaiting the Messiah in the what we'd call maybe the first coming, right? So the biblical passages are first coming passages. Anything that either speaks of, like in the Old Testament, speaks of the coming of the Messiah, or it could be like John the Baptist passages where he's talking about the soon coming one, turns out to be Jesus. Even some of the really
spoiler alert.
Yeah. Even some of the birth stories, but not the ones where the actual birth takes place, but it's like soon coming, it's just before the birth. And also some of the later Jesus parables where he seems to be talking about the second coming. So some of those passages can get read during the Advent season. And we read all of these biblical passages, and we focus and we use the stories of those waiting for the first coming of the Messiah in order to think about and reflect on and religiously consider and pray over the second coming of Christ. When whichever way it works, there's a lot of different opinions on this.
Zechariah's voice being taken away.
Yeah.
So would that be an example of what you're talking about?
Right, exactly.
Luke 1?
Okay, yeah. So Advent really isn't about Christmas. It's about focusing on the waiting of Christians for the return of Christ. And the way I put it when I preach is I say the return of Christ, either he to us or us to him, we to him. Meaning either when he comes back to this earth or when we go to Christ himself.
That's pretty good.
I would add that. That may not be part of the liturgical calendar there, but I still think that's a good way to think about it. So Advent isn't Christmas, even though even before Thanksgiving finished, Christmas was all over the stores.
I saw my first Christmas advertisement in August of this year.
Jeez.
So whatever that's worth.
Yeah. So Advent's a time of waiting, and I find that's profound that we're becoming such during what is supposed to be the season of Advent, we can't stop but jump right into Christmas, when we're supposed to focus on the waiting.
Yeah,
time.
we're completely missing the point.
But
yeah,
see, the waiting is the hardest part.
Exactly.
As a wise man once said. So here's from Christianity.com. This is written by Justin Holcomb, who's an Episcopalian priest. And so here's...
By the way, kudos to them for getting that domain on the internet. Christianity.com.
Yeah, it's pretty well played.
It's like getting news.com.
So he writes, today, the Advent season lasts typically for 4 Sundays leading up to Christmas. And at that time, the new Christian year begins with the 12-day celebration of the Christmas tide, which lasts from Christmas Eve until Epiphany.
Way to sound like you know what you're talking about.
I thought I said Christmas and Santicide.
And Santicide? You're going to murder Santa.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So Advent symbolizes the present situation of the church in the last days, right?
I want a
As we're
12-day Christmas.
anticipating Jesus' return. No, you don't. as God's
Kinda
people
like
wait
Hanukkah, right?
for the return of Christ in glory to consummate his eternal kingdom. So you're focusing heavily on the waiting here, and this is for sure the thing that we're worst at in Western culture is waiting. So
Yeah, I mean, some funny stories about me, just as an anecdote about waiting. I could not wait to open gifts. I had one of those homes like most of us do, at least in America or Western world,
America.
where we'd have the Christmas tree and we'd have the gifts underneath the tree for a number of weeks before Christmas actually happened. And I hated staring at those Christmas gifts, not knowing what was in them. Like, if the corners got a little roughed up, I'd rough them up a bit more so I could try to peek inside, or I might pick them up, shake them around to see what's inside them, if they're heavy or light, or if they
Sock and poppers.
And my dad was evil. He would, whatever he bought, he'd get a much bigger box than that thing, and then fill it up with a bunch of junk and paper and things that didn't matter, just to hide the smaller thing in that box. So I could not possibly guess.
It's pretty soul crushing as a 7-year-old.
Yeah, he's awful. Anyway,
I bet we'd get along.
take that, Dad. No, but that's just an anecdote. Like, we don't like waiting. We want to open up the Christmas present, which is the future, right? We don't.
Right.
And that's why Advent actually is very important. It's about focusing on the value of waiting and how transformative waiting can be. What Christian patience is, what it means to pray in a time of waiting, what it means to better yourself in a time of waiting. Some passages that sometimes get focused on by liturgical churches during this time is like one that always comes to my mind is Luke 19 verses 11 and the following verses. And there's what we call the parable of the pounds here, where a master goes off on a long trip and he leaves things with his slaves, and then when he comes back, he asks what did his slaves do with those things? Did they do better by them? And then it's a parable. It's not a literal story, but the master judges them based on like if they were productive with what they were left with, and it's supposed to be used as a anecdotal, metaphorical, allegorical even story about
a lot of ickles.
Right. About in our waiting, what are we doing in our time of waiting with what we've been given? And
making a podcast.
Making a podcast. Woot woot.
Doing your work, Lord.
You just left me up.
God's palace is way up on the moon.
That's what an event's supposed to be about. It's not supposed to be about trying to rush to Christmas. It's about trying to actually pause in this season to focus and to think about the value of waiting and patience.
And this is really interesting to me because this is kind of the trajectory of the entire New Testament, right? Paul writes, I think it's Romans 8, if I remember right, about the earth being kind of in labor pains and about the age to come. And this is super important because
I like to think of Earth in that passage as just like a really fat guy. Just in
labor pains?
Yeah, I guess that would make a lot of sense.
So the idea of birthing this age to come, it's commonly referred to as the parousia, right? And essentially...
Advent is actually the Latin word that's used to translate parousia.
Oh, well, Adventus, is that right?
Adventus.
All right, nailed it. My Latin is non-existent. So as we're like... Well, here's what I'm ultimately asking. This is in every single way, shape, and form. It's part of the most bedrock fundamental Christianity that there is, right? This belief that the history of the world
not the death, burial, resurrection, but
right,
this.
Right, this in addition to that.
Yeah,
I
understood.
The world is marching towards this concept of reconciliation and restoration with the Creator. And
when God's will is fully realized.
In this world, right? Yeah. We're so as of right now, and from Pauline times to really now, we've been stuck in this
now and not yet
eschatological viewpoint, which means basically Jesus has come once, right? And he's coming again, but not yet there. So the kingdom of heaven is ushering, it's making its way into earth. It's making its way on earth as it is in heaven, as Jesus teaches the disciples and us subsequently how to pray. This is what we need to be focusing on, I think, importantly for two reasons. Because waiting reminds us of how valuable our time is here.
Yeah.
And this
and
is
how valuable here is. We're not trying to escape
exactly,
this place.
Exactly. The phrase, right, being so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good.
Yeah.
There. And this is what I have come to kind of loathe about evangelical Christianity over my time, both in the church and just around the church.
Because they finish a can of soda, crumple it up there on the ground, like, I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, I don't need
go
to
right
worry about
down
anything. And like, there's such an obsession with prophecy of end times. There's such an obsession of when am I getting out of here and blah, blah, blah. And all of that has its place, and I don't think it's worthless, but I kind of think it's worthless.
Places in the trash can.
And with that soda can, you litterer. And so I wish that we would do a better job of focusing on the value of the gospel in the here and now, because if the gospel only matters for after you die, right? It's not really good news. And this is what I love about the Advent season, though. And I am very critical of mainline churches, I think for good reason. But this is where I think they do this very well. Yeah. Taking time to stop, to reflect, Episcopalian, Anabaptist,
Methodist.
Catholic, Methodist, Anglican. They do a fantastic job of having, like you were saying earlier off air, about this liturgical calendar, of being able to help guide and usher and move people into this season of reflection there. And we don't do that well enough in the evangelical church. In fact, we suck at that. And for all intents and purposes, we're awful at that.
In fact, it's like very counter to what we do, which is don't worry about your pain now because good is coming. We make people eager to fast forward,
to escape,
right? To escape.
I mean, it's
escapism.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. And so, this is troubling. I think of Paul in Philippians 1, and talking about this specifically, where he has this strong desire to depart and go home and be with the Lord, but he knows about his need here, how the church and the people need him here. And if you're watching this video, there's a direct challenge that comes out of this Advent season to you, the viewer, the friend of the podcast, the downloader of whatever, to understand that you have, if you call yourself a follower of Jesus Christ, you have a specific command on your life to be valuable in this earth to people now. Yeah. This is why church attendance is so important. This is why fellowship is so important, because you are a part of the body of Christ and you have specific additions to make. Yeah. You have specific gifts to give. You have specific talents that your local body needs.
Any gifts God gives the church, it's to give through us to others.
Yes, and this, like, oh man, we just got to get to heaven. Like, I just got to make it's pervasive, it's awful, and it's downright unbiblical.
We spend a lot of time in the evangelical church trying to convince people you have Jesus. Like you and Jesus are like best buds. You're tight. You're good. Jesus is just always like slapping you on the back. Like he's always right here. Advent season's a little bit of a balance to that, saying no, maybe you're waiting for Jesus. Maybe there is somewhat of a gap here that you can't ignore. You have the Holy Spirit, you have the church, but at the same time, things aren't fully realized. Right. That there is something you're waiting for, a greater relationship that's in the horizon, not now. And that there's value in figuring out what's good about this time of waiting, in this time of being sober about the reality of the world, which is you're here, and there's good to be done here. And so, yeah, I mean, I would... don't be afraid of the word Advent. Don't be afraid of the liturgical calendar. You don't have to do it all, but it does have some value, and it has a lot of value in my opinion. And I would say take this time to think about what Advent season could be, instead of just being a time of holiday shopping, instead of just being a time of pretending we're in Christmas, which we're not. Maybe make this a time when you spend more time praying and doing biblical studies and spending time with the church in a conscious time of waiting, and making good on that waiting and trying to be transformed positively by that waiting.
So, Chris, do you have anything you want to add?
No, not really.
Okay, so we'll
nailed it.
We'll leave you with two challenges from the Faith and Whatever podcast as we wrap up our religion discussion here. Think of this Advent hymn, right? O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile here until the Son of God appears. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Reflect on that as you move through your month. There's value in that. The second thing is, we'll link it in the description below there, but there is a Advent Bible verses there. There's 28 scriptures that can be broken into 4 weeks, which would be a passage for each day through the month. So we'll put the link to that and follow along there. So if you would, be sure to connect with us on all forms of social media. Give this video a like and a share. You can follow us at Twitter at faithandwhatever. I'm at Josh_Carmen. Jamothy is at James YUILE. Chris is at Marion Ranch Records. Thanks so much for stopping by, and happy Advent.
Happy Advent. Yeah.